All right, everyone. Brace yourself for the new webcam in 3, 2, 1. Hey, how's it going, everyone? It's me, Tristan, from Back History. Welcome to my stream that I do on Mondays, where I talk to you guys for a couple hours about things and stuff and events and goings on. I am your host, Tristan, and this is Step Back Today. My day show. I'm here. I've got a couple things to be excited about. So this, if you guys don't notice, is a new webcam. So I have made the leap to 1080p with a camera that is new and 3 times as much as the last one I bought. Because I take streaming seriously now. So let me just minimize. So now you can see my wonderful face, and the other thing you might have noticed is I've soundproofed this room a little bit more. So since the last stream, I've put up more blackout curtains, and I put up a you guys can't see it because it's right behind the camera, but I put up like soundproofing foam. So a lot of the early reflections are gonna get captured. So hopefully there will not be less echo. So I hope that the sound sounds good. This is my attempt to make things look and sound better for not just the stream, but for videos and voiceover stuff in general. And I'm also not yelling, which is nice. So sound sounds good, looks good. Damn, I might almost be a professional YouTuber at this point. And of course, this is all possible because of your gracious donations over at patreon.com/stepbackhistory or paypal.me/stepbackhistory, which I have to, do a small shout out to because, it's fun. It's what keeps me going. So, yeah. So this is the new week. This is rad mug. Oh, thank you. This is the Canadian White House, which I think was probably, it's an igloo, and I think this comes across as some sort of tacky thing that was purchased, but I think that it might just be, I don't know, something that like was purchased for Kelly or for me from a boomer who was enamored by Canada. Yeah, so that's how I got the things. Das racist. Maybe a little bit. All right. So what's been going on? As far as my own development as a creator, I have, since the last stream, we released a really cool video on the Confederate States of America, whomst people really liked. I learned that real fast. The video's doing really well. It's up there with the Ancient Aliens video and the Canadian Far Right as like my most successful videos that's come out in recent memory. And on top of that, it's how would I explain? It has gotten a lot of subscriber appeal. So I think it's like it has something like a 30% increase in in views over the average from primarily from subscribers, which means that that's a sign that it's a video that's probably going to have a successful life afterwards, which is great. That was the plan of being a little bit more strategic about how I chose the topics I did and things like that. So there we go. I also was approached by Skillshare to do a couple more Skillshare bits, sponsorships in August. So expect that. Thank you, Pink Bones, for saying my videos are awesome. That's much appreciated. Thanks. So things are going great. Kind of a personal thing, but later today I'm also going to be going to the Thought Cafe studio. So for a tour, anyone knows Thought Cafe, they are the animation company that do the Thought Bubble for Crash Course. I met the CEO of Thought Cafe when I was at an educational conference before VidCon, and I asked if I could just go to the Thought Cafe office and just like see the cool shit that they do, and he said yes, and so I'm going today at 4:00. I'm pretty excited for that. I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to do there, but I'm eager to just see how it all works and look at them have fun and do cool stuff. Because they're based out of Toronto, so I'm like, I've been here for 2 years and I still haven't gone and seen them, and so I'm really happy to have done that. As far as being like strategic about future videos, I can tell you guys a little bit about the things that I'm working on for that. Let me just take a look real quick. Right now, I've got 2 sponsorships that are going to come out in August. I think I'm going to do August 12th and August 26th are when those are going to come out. And I'm currently working on the first one, which is going to be a new video, or it's going to be a video for the Brief History series. So one of the things that happened is I got a Patreon stretch goal back in, I think, June, that unlocked to do a brief history of all of the famous BRICS countries, i.e. Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, which are the countries that are guessed to become the world superpowers of the 22nd century based on things like economic growth and population figures and things like that. So I'm working on the first one of those. So I've been spending a lot of time knee deep in becoming a quick expert in the history of Brazil. So now I'm doing I'm doing a brief history of Brazil as the first sponsored video. So look forward to that one, which will be interesting because I think I'm going to frame the series as like they're going to be interviewing for who's going to be the next world superpower. And so I'm going to have it like, it's going to be like a job interview for Brazil to become a world superpower. And I have so many things I want to do with that video already. I want to really abuse, if you guys remember from earlier, from the World Cup in Brazil, where they got they got their asses handed to them by the Germans. There was this great viral video that came out as a response to that, which I want to use a lot. And I also just want to do some fun stuff where I'm going to like juxtapose the Brazil, like, carnival, fun, beach adventure, like, happy, bright colors, and the Brazil that's like military dictatorships and slavery and all that kind of stuff. So I have a lot of fun stuff I want to do with that. I haven't, I'm still doing research right now, so I haven't gotten real deep into it yet, but I have to have it done in 9 days, so I'll have plenty of time to work on it from then on. As far as and the other one is going to be part of the religion series, which I know you guys are also big fans of. I'm going to do the world religion series now. I had originally planned to do a world religion series going around the Indian religions. But what happened was that Kogito started doing them before me. And so like I was going to make a Hinduism video, and then Kogito made a Hinduism video. And I'm like, well, it's not really like awesome to do now. So I'm going to grab the last one that hasn't been done. Since I already did the Buddhism one, I'm going to do the, what's it called? I'm going to do Jainism as my next one. So Jainism is like this Indian religion that's related to Hinduism and Buddhism, but is less known than the other two. They're very small in number, but they're like radical pacifists to the point where like they can't ride in airplanes because the engines might hurt a bird, and they walk with like these like white masks in front of their face, so that they don't accidentally inhale any insects and like sweep the ground in front of them. So that's like the next idea for like the next religion series video. And then I don't know where the religion series is going to go after that, but I'm sure there's still lots of religions out there to cover. I feel like I should probably veer into one of the Abrahamic faiths. Yeah. So it'll be fun. It'll be fun to get into. I'm excited for it. And I might, like with heavy emphasis, push the religion series over into the Abrahamic faiths. I think that'd be fun. Be interesting to just like have a video that is just like, what is Christianity actually? Do the Iranian religions. I've done a couple Iranian religions, Great Red Menace. I did a video about, what's it called? The Iranian religions. I did a video on Zoroastrianism. So that one's already been done. I also did a video on the Baha'i religion, but I haven't done Manichaeism or whatever. That one probably is still on my list. Yeah, there's still tons and tons of religions and kind of extant and extinct that you could do. So there's lots of places to go with that one. But next up is going to be Jainism. That one I'm hoping to have by the end of the month. And yeah, what about different types of Christian religions? Is Baha'i in Brazil? No. I'm just talking about two different videos that I have to make that I've chosen to make for a Skillshare sponsorship. Skillshare came back to me last week, offering to make more, to do more sponsorships. So I'm doing those two as part of the thing. So we'll see where things go. And I've got some other stuff too that I got to sit on. There's another one of those big history YouTuber collaborations in the works. I can't go into details about what it's about, but like the Project Revolution or Project Odysseus big collaborations that happened a little while back. I'm gonna do one of those this year. What else do I have to discuss? I have some other cool things that are all cooking. So life is very busy these days, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Overclocked Abrahamic faith. Do you mean overlooked? Yeah. Okay. So I have one question, which was, In his Vox interview, Rutger Bregman said that he thinks UBI would make conditions for public sector workers better because it makes striking less financially risky. Agree or disagree? I don't have a super strong statement on this part. I think that for specifically striking, the idea that you can handle there's like a built-in strike fund, I do think has some very good implications for the future of what a UBI future might look like. The problem that I have usually with UBI is that as it's treated like this very easy to relax upon subject, or like for example, if that everybody gets $1,000 a month, and that, maybe they wouldn't be able to be happy, but they'd be able to like at least get their rent paid, even if they didn't have money or if they didn't have a job. That could eventually trickle into public policy. Specifically, why do you need things like protections for workers? Like, why do you need to give somebody a notice before they're laid off? And there's stuff in place with like severance packages and things like that that might make it, that are there by law to make it that you have to give people warning, and that there has to be some sort of compensation if you're going to let someone go without like, unless they like did something like blatantly bad, like something to get fired for. And so I could see a lot of these like small protections for the rights of unions, for the stability of jobs disappearing. And on a longer term, if UBI is not something to transition into, something a little bit more, something a little bit less capitalist, then I could see UBI turning our entire economy into something like a gig economy, which I think would be objectively worse than what we have now. So that's why, like, I think a lot of the people who are talking about UBI as like this like immediately positive thing, because there is positive stuff to it. I think that having UBI is slightly better than, not having UBI like we have now. Just we'll have to see. Pedro Haferman says, could you possibly start your history of Brazil with pre-colonial times? That is the plan. I have only done like the most basic of research, but I definitely want to start with like, I want to start with as like early as stuff like the debate over where the first people to Brazil came from. But I do think that like there's like things like the Majuara culture, and different like different tribes and groups and clans that live in Brazil. And I think that if I'm going to cover those, like, I think that some of those should be should be in their own video, but I am because this is going to be a brief history, so I can't get like bogged down, because you could, the history of Brazil is very long, and it's very storied, and a lot of stuff happened, and so you could very easily go down a rabbit hole. Like you could take an entire PhD in Brazilian history, and many people do. It's just like this is going to be like the quick overview, but I'll try my best. I definitely, Pedro, I don't know how long you've been watching Step Back, but I definitely try to give a lot of attention to pre-Columbian peoples and the role of pre-Columbian societies as part of the history of a longer country. Are you going to talk about the lost Amazonian civilization we basically know nothing about? I definitely will mention that part, that there's growing evidence right now in Brazil that there's a society that lived in the Amazon that are extremely sophisticated, and we are a little ignorant about what the society was like. All we really know is that where they lived is likely grown over by the Amazon, and that they have that they were much more complex and sophisticated than we are, or that we thought before, because we thought that because of the rainforest and because of like the depleted soil and stuff like that, that Brazil was not a place that it's not a place that could have sophisticated civilizations. But we're learning that that wasn't the case, and that maybe a lot more of the Amazonian rainforest is actually, ruled, or was a lot more cultivated than we gave it credit for today. But yeah, there's not a whole lot known about these people. There's very few bits of evidence that survives because to basically go digging around looking for evidence of the Amazonian civilization would involve digging in the Amazon rainforest, which you can imagine is not the easiest thing to do in the world. So not a lot of people get to do it, but we are finding like little bits of it as we start, as the Brazilians are clear cutting the Amazon to make like cow ranches and stuff like that. Okay. Why don't Western nations like Canada recognize the nation status of Somaliland? Why does the West hate third world democracies and like dictatorships? Well, I can't speak exactly to the specific case of Somaliland. Why does the West hate third world democracies and like dictatorships? Is because third world democracies are developed in opposition to Western imperial hegemony. I just recently watched a documentary about the Democratic Republic of Congo called Virunga, and about how what Western companies or Western countries which serve the interests of Western corporations want are countries where they can come in and exploit the natural resources of that region. So stuff like there's like in the case of Virunga, which had to do with oil exploration under a lake in a protected national park in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The people were happy that the government could just get bribed and was corrupt enough that a British oil company called SOCO was able to worm their way in and push for illegal oil exploration, despite the fact that it's a World Heritage Site. So, a lot of those places in the world, they want to maintain, like a lot of like global capitalism is based on keeping the former colonizers rich while still finding ways to exploit the natural resources of the formerly colonized world. Very often, third world democracies are a step towards decolonization and having a sense of self-standing, and that's not what Western powers like. And also, typically with countries like Somaliland, I think Website Tourist is talking about this a little bit. So oftentimes, in those like unrecognized countries, there's like a whole bunch of geopolitics at play that I'm really not privy to. What in the case of Somaliland? So, has there ever been a successful one? Cat's Paw, a successful third world democracy? I would probably say that there was the Haitian Revolution. Which survived despite huge amounts of American and Western intervention. I don't know what this means. What's your stance on the forced feminization of Nazis post-revolution? That sounds weird. So... will your Brazilian history be one video or a mini-series? It's going to be one video. It's part of a series on the BRICS countries. So the idea would be to, do a Brazil video, and then later on do like a Russia video, an India video, a China video, and a South Africa video. So the idea is to do the whole series so that we have our job interviews covered for who's going to be the next, rulers of the world in the 22nd century. All right. Let's go. Hello, T and friends. Hello. Okay, so I'm gonna be right back though. I have to go to the washroom, so I will be back in just a minute. All right, I am back. Let's take a look at the chat. Was Yugoslavia third world? Yes, Yugoslavia was a third world country. It was not aligned with the Soviet Union nor the United States. And it had its own, although it was a quote-unquote socialist country, it sort of did its own thing. For example, they had this sort of market socialism that was very different from like central planning. I think was really interesting. Do you believe capitalism has suppressed technology and inventions? Oh, hell yes. There's a lot of people who have talked about this. So capitalism incentivizes the creation of things that are profitable over things that are good. And so if there was something that could be made, and in making it, it's not, it would make less profit, it would be disincentivized to be made. For example, 1 second, I'm hearing my wife's very loud computer in the other room. I'm going to close the door. Okay. So, for example, I think the big one that comes up is in medicine. Medicine is very hard to make profitable in a context. I'm going to turn on the fan. It's getting real. I'm getting kind of sweaty. Let me just see how... Okay, that's too loud. Okay. So, yes, the idea that there's like a profit, like medicine takes years to research, hiring extremely specialized experts, and often leads to a lot of dead ends. And then when the medicine comes out, to withhold it from the patients that need it is ghoulish. And so this is not like a solution. Like, this cannot be really done in a capitalist manner. We have capitalism taking care of it now, and you end up with things like really important medical interventions, like researching new antibiotics. That is underfunded because, like, we talk about like the oncoming antibiotic resistance catastrophe as if this is some sort of natural phenomenon, and that what we need to do is stop using antibiotics, or we need to stop overusing them, which is still a thing we should do. But like, that talks about like how this is something that needs to be incented. Like, the problem is antibiotics are something that require a lot of work to develop. And when they are developed, they're only useful for a certain amount of time until antibiotic resistance takes over. And typically, when someone takes them, they take them for a period of time instead of like one pill a day forever, which is much less profitable. And so therefore, private medical research companies can't get good profit margins on developing new antibiotics. So they just don't get developed. And now we're facing a dilemma where we're running out of useful antibiotics, and we might be going back to, like, pre-antibiotic levels of medicine, which put extreme limits on like what you can do in terms of like surgery and recovery for certain illnesses and things like that. And it's just like scary stuff, but there's no way to profit off of it, so there's no way to develop it. You would need to do that. And then on top of that, because capitalist organizations are very focused on short-term gains that corporations developing biotech, or just technology in general, are not incentivized to make inventions that, or do things like what's called general research in science terms, which is general research is like, I'm not looking to develop anything out of this for industrial purposes. I'm just looking into a subject. I'm looking into something. I'm doing general research to find out more about something. That is only really able to be done in universities and such. And universities are losing their funding year on year by and large. And in order to keep their funding up, they have to usually apply for grants. And to apply for grants, they usually have to have some sort of industrial application for the thing that they're developing. And so a lot of like new big revolutionary inventions that come from not just like tinkering with things we already know, but like exploring new types of science, those are not incentivized on a capitalist model. A lot of the big innovations that we can think of in the 20th century that you might associate with capitalism, things like the internet, things like cell phones, things like microprocessors and the computers, all of those were developed with public funds. Specifically, I think a lot of them were military projects. And so, but like no real developments come from capitalist means, unless you count like being able to make combination shampoo and conditioner a great leap forward for human technology. And things that are very important that would have a great way of benefiting humanity in ways that would not be profitable, like making things that are more environmentally friendly, making things that are less disposable, material research to make more sturdy and repairable things. That doesn't get incentivized either, because disposable is more profitable, because then you have to buy another one. So that kind of stuff is disincentivized. So in many ways, capitalism is one of the number one things that disincentivizes like developing new ideas. And also because people are in competition with each other instead of cooperation with each other, they don't share their knowledge, they don't collaborate, and very often a lot of effort is put in capitalist economies to not only not share the information that you have with others, but to destroy other organizations and become the monopoly. So stop them from being able to do research. So there's like lots and lots of reasons why capitalism is just bad for science. The other day you said the first countries to go communist might be the US or the UK. What did you mean by that? I thought nation states by definition can't go socialist. I think I meant that the first I did not say communist, I said socialist. And I do think that socialist movements would rise in the United States and the United Kingdom, because at the moment they've both got insurgent socialist movements, or social democratic movements, or whatever you want to split hairs about. They have groups like that on the rise, and because of the current context of both countries, with the UK facing an upcoming massive economic downturn, and the United States currently in a state of political chaos, that the established order is weaker in those countries than it has been in a long time, which could be movement to make a more a more successful socialist movement in the near-term future. All we need is like Sanders or Corbyn to become leader of their countries, and we could see some major changes. Okay. What's your opinion on the historical relationship between the U.S. and Turkey? How come Republicans and even progressives like Ilhan Omar refuse to condemn their occupation of Cyprus? Don't exactly know too much about the Cyprus situation. I know that there was a war between Turkey and Greece over what to do with Cyprus, and that the UN peacekeepers were involved, but honestly, that's not like something I super know a whole lot about. But Turkey has been for a long time a movement of, or a social geopolitical ally of the United States. One that's usually strategically placed to counter the USSR, which is and controls one of the most important waterways in the in the world, with the the Black Sea. And so I will say I don't have. Just a second. Now that I open that, or I close that door, there is a cat that is clawing at the door trying to get in for some reason. Okay, but I don't know why. I guess to make Turkey happy, they are refusing to get involved with these things. It's geopolitics. Anytime that countries have to take like a blind side to horrible conditions somewhere, I think is where you'll see a lot of times it's geopolitics of some kind or another. In this case, it's because Turkey is an important strategic ally, and they know that Turkey at the moment has a closer and closer relationship with the Russian Federation, and that if that ever breaks down, if the West ever has a breakdown in their relationships with Turkey, that Turkey might just, get out of a lot of things. And it's a major linchpin of the American Western national hegemony. Ain't Turkey kind of fashy? Yes, at the moment it is. It has a right-wing, very centralized, very authoritarian president by the name of Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who is definitely moving Turkey in a more authoritarian direction, which that's not great. Okay. Do you think that socialism can lead to true communism, or should we just destroy the state ASAP? I have complex feelings about this at the moment. I am obviously, as you can see by the sign in the back, very anarchisty in my ideal outlook, and I do wonder. I do think that the ways do not justify the means in a lot of these cases, and that the shape of your future society lends a lot to how you got there. And this is why I really don't like people who play with the idea of LARPing the 1917 revolution. The leftists who think that somehow if they stockpile enough guns and they train as insurgent soldiers, that somehow they're going to destroy the world's militaries with their armored personnel carriers, Hellfire missiles, and Predator drones, that somehow they're going to just beat all of that and take over the world, and that's just like, that's how things are going to go down. It's going to be easy, it'll be fun, we'll be home by Christmas type thinking. I think that is not a way towards fixing the overlying issue of the world. And I do think that voting and electing democratic socialist or social democratic governments have a lot of benefit for the world. They can make things better in the immediate short term, but they are of limited utility. Like, I know that electing Bernie Sanders is not going to end capitalism, and it would be kind of naive to think that he will. But it is a real quick way to make things better for a lot of people right now. But to get the true communism, you're going to need, you're not going to be able to transition like a regular government through voting for the right people into a post-capitalist society and then to a communist society. And that, in the end, the concept of states is as much an issue as the concept of capitalism in keeping us stuck in a cycle of never getting ahead towards the goal of creating, the stateless, classless society. We learned that with the Soviet Union. And so my thought, my thinking is that we're going to push to sort of figure something else out. That there's not an option. There's an option that doesn't involve LARPing 1917 and also doesn't involve just like hoping to, just holding hands and hoping that electing the right person will get things through. Robert Peterson, thank you so much for the $5 super chat. It's really appreciated. This work that I do is very tough, and in order to keep doing it, because now it's my full-time job, things like your super chat are what I need to, keep rent paid and cats fed and all sorts of things. So to continue, I've been thinking a little bit about what the next stage is for us, for the human race. And I'm starting to think that there might be a solution in one of the most anarchistic inventions to ever be made, which was the internet. I know that sounds hokey, and I know that a lot of people are like, oh, we're going to use the internet to solve all of the world's problems. And I mean, like, that's like, it's like, I think that's almost like as empty as like when people say that the issue is we need more education, and it's like, okay, it's true. It's like, what's it called? Mental health awareness. Like, yeah, well, what maybe on top of mental health awareness, we can have some like mental health resources. But in my mind, I kind of like had this concept of using automated features and using things like using like a social network program to create a sort of shadow economy through like almost something like CyberSyn, where people's work, people's ability to make things and do things can be freely exchanged and automated in an automated fashion, so that nobody is like forced to do too much stuff and get the kind of like to each according to their needs, from each according to their ability, and turn it into some sort of like networked economic model that's just based on freely exchanging things. And don't know where that would go. So I'm very interested what the future of that might be. But I do think that creating sort of a shadow economy that's in direct competition with the capitalist one, that I would argue would work better for the people who participate in it, will pull people out of the capitalist economy, which will directly shrink the power of capitalism and the state. How is the shadow economy not ANCAP? Because it would not be based on the exchange of currency. The idea would be to create like a digital cybersyn type organization where people sign up, they say what kinds of things that they have access to and what kinds of things that they have the capability of doing and making. So for example, I am a really good person at doing this, and you would say what kinds of things you need to do that, and then if you need something, you would just say like, hey, I'm looking for this, and the system itself would try to find the closest person to you who either had access to such a thing or could make such a thing. And if they needed like materials to make such a thing, then it would reach out to people who said that they had access to said materials, and it would sort of create its own like artificial intelligence economy. But in no way does like there's no like limits or anything like that. But it's kind of like the idea of communal, as says Logan Anderson. It's like communal living, but it's automated so that you can have elements of commune economies over longer distances. And I do think that if an anarchist socialist society is ever going to function, that you would need to have something like this in order to have the very locally community focused organizations like anarchist organizations work with complex worldwide supply chains of economic stuff that like in the complex economy we have now. And so in my mind, I was thinking if we're going to transition away from capitalism, we could start by building that and using it to as much as possible keep our involvement in the capitalist economy as low as possible and see where we go from there. It was an idea that I literally had in a dream, and I wrote a Twitter thread about it, and it would not be a solution, but it might be a start. So that's my idea. Why must you put a syndicalist flag next to social democratic buttons? Because I had to, there's only so much space on that back wall, and you can be a communist, you can be a anarcho-syndicalist, and still want your friends in America to be able to go to the doctor without going bankrupt. I think that a lot of leftists should pay a little bit more attention to the difference between what we can do to make a better world in 300 years and what we could do to make a better world in 3 years. And so I've got all that Bernie Sanders stuff because I think that Bernie Sanders has got a lot of stuff to do with like making things better for Americans like now, and not about like how do we create an ideal society that overturns the entire infrastructure of the global economy and government. Because that's a tall order. That's going to be quite a project. But I still think it's worth doing. It's just that it's there's a short-term versus long-term thing going on here. Do you believe the conspiracy theory that for-profit companies benefit from cancer, and also if capitalism never existed, do you think we would have cures for cancer and autism at this point? No. The only reason I would say this is because I think that cancer is common enough that if a for-profit company could develop a pill that you could take every day to deal with your cancer, they would have made it by now. And also because I am a person who, by circumstance of being a grad student who didn't really fit in the history department, had a lot of friends who were scientists. And I happen to know that trying to cure cancer is extremely complicated and it's really hard. One of the hardest things we've ever had to try and figure out. And that's like a thing that, that's like a thing. And also, I think when you're talking about like cancer, so cancer is like one of those things that's going to be like really hard for us to beat. And it's going to take a while. It's going to be like, we're going to need like nanotechnology and stuff like that to really get to the bottom of how to deal with it. Sorry, just Slack's making noises. I should close it while I'm streaming with you guys. So, in my mind, that's like the just cancer is like, it's called the emperor of disease for a reason. It's gonna be like the last thing we're able to figure out because there's so much going on. If you think about it, there's no virus. Most of the time, there's not a virus. There's no antibody to defeat in order to get what we want. You are literally dealing with bugs in our own genetic code. And not even bugs that were there to begin with, but bugs that are added through millions and millions and millions of small things that happen to us every single day, some of which as simple as going outside. And so to really find a cure for cancer is going to be it's going to be a long and hard fought battle. And until like we find like, I don't know, like nanobots or something that are going to be able to hunt down cancer cells and kill them, there's not going to be like a cure for cancer. But I think that it's easy to understand why someone might think that that like for-profit companies are suppressing the cure for cancer because of the kind of things I mentioned earlier. As for autism, I don't really think autism is a thing that you cure. It's not, it's like ADHD. It's kind of, it's not, there's this idea we have to get away from, the way that we think about psychology and psychiatric stuff, to kind of get away from the idea that these are diseases that need to be quote unquote cured, and that instead the idea is thinking of them as different forms of ability and disability, but also as just being more accepting of a wider variety of ways that brains can be wired and function. There are all sort. There's like I think that's where like the term like neurodivergent and neurotypical come from, where having different types of brain setups is it's a form of there's a form of disability in it, but it's not about curing it as much as it is about making a society in which somebody can have a perfectly normal life with said thinking. And I do think that also that there's, that it's not like a thing that's like, curing the cold or something like that. Like, for example, I have attention deficit hyperactive disorder, which is considered a learning disability. it puts me under the umbrella of someone who is neuroatypical. And my thinking is, if somebody said that they had the quote-unquote cure for ADHD, that they could just give you a pill, which they try and do, but it's a bit different. But if they could give you a pill that would like just make it so that all of the personality traits that come with having ADHD disappear, like, I would love to be able to manage the symptoms of ADHD, especially the stuff that really destroys, or really, puts strains on my personal relationships. But also I know for a fact that the fact that I have ADHD plays a role in some of the parts of my personality that I'm very, like, that I'm okay with, that I'm very proud of. I think the fact that I am a successful, okay, maybe successful is a bit strong, but that I am a YouTuber that has had some success comes down to the fact that I have ADHD, because ADHD people are constantly seeking novel experiences, which means that we absorb a lot more new and interesting things, which mean that we tend to be more outgoing and creative. And I wouldn't want to take that part of my personality away just so that, I would not have to, like I did this morning, apparently, where I do not have incidences like where I set up the coffee machine to go off. Like, one of my jobs is to set up the coffee machine so that in the morning we have coffee when we wake up. And I apparently forgot to put the coffee in said coffee machine. And so my wife woke up to a pot of hot water. So that kind of stuff happens. But, I would think that to trade it. Someone asked if I'm on Ritalin or Adderall or something like that. And no, I am not. I am, from the testing that I was given, I am considered very high functioning for someone with ADHD, mostly because my ADHD was discovered later in life. I got my diagnosis when I was 24 or 25, something like that. And when they did this kind of intelligence test to measure your different intelligences, they showed that because of sort of higher levels in different areas of the different types of intelligences, that the areas that I was weak in had a lot of compensation. And so the intelligences that I were weak in were the ones that had requirements in focus and attention. They were significantly lower than my other intelligences, but they weren't extremely low for the general population, if that makes sense. Because according to the test, I'm a super smarty pants. So the areas that I had that were low were still considered on the low end of normal for a, average person. But for within a standard deviation of the norm, I guess I would say, because of the other, but it was significantly lower than parts of my intelligence. So they, because I wasn't that low, they considered it a milder case, or that I have used my other mental abilities to kind of compensate. And so because of that, and because of me being a big boy, doctors don't want to give me anything like Ritalin or Adderall because they think that there will be blood pressure issues. And on top of that, they don't think my case is strong enough to justify giving me Adderall, especially because it's kind of not something that they want to give me anyway because of health things. So that's the general rundown about why I'm not on Adderall or Ritalin. I did take Ritalin when I was a kid for a couple months. When I was a kid, I went to an endless parade of child psychologists, and it literally was they would go back and forth over whether I had ADHD, And so for a while they were like, oh, I do have ADHD. And so they gave me Ritalin for a little while when I was like in the 7th grade, and then I went off of it when I was like in the 9th grade. So like, yeah, and I do know that like autism spectrum disorder is, depending upon the severity of the case, is also can be a lot more debilitating to people who it can be a lot more debilitating to people who suffer from it, or who have autism spectrum disorder, compared to people with ADHD. But it really depends upon where you are. There's obviously a full, broad spectrum, just like there is for ADHD. And I imagine people with severe ADHD and people with severe autism spectrum disorder probably have lots of little things that make their disorder annoying to them and to the people around them, as I've learned so many times. That I think that it's not like it's like a secret superpower, but it's still, when you are neurodivergent, it's kind of part of who you are, edges and all, and so sometimes it can be difficult to get those two separated, and that's why things like saying like the cure for autism is a little strange. Why are the left perceived as elites when the right are the ones that are the most aligned with capitalist hierarchy? I think this might have to do with the fact that the idea that there's like this correlation between left-wing politics and education. Surprise, surprise, you become more left-wing the more educated you are. And whether or not you're poor, as a person who is who's educated, kind of seems to determine whether or not you're a leftist or a liberal. But it does mean that because education is correlated with higher incomes, that if you are looking at the world from the perspective of a reactionary conservative, where you think that just giving people basic human rights is considered a leftist position, then you're going to see, wealthy people who are educated as like, oh, they're liberals, therefore I see them as leftists because they want to give people basic human rights. When like, so like that's what kind of, and when media is always told from the perspective of conservatives, that's the narrative that gets crafted. While like, I would say as a socialist that the elites tend to be centrist libs for the most part, which sure, they can agree that that people should not be like actively oppressed most of the time, I should say. But like, you're never like, I don't see like any elites arguing for like fundamental transformations to human society, or like the redistribution of resources. Next question here was, how old are your cats? I think that Kelly already answered in the chat, but Phoebe is about 9 or 10, and Romeo is about 4. Next question. What should young baby leftist age 14 to 20 or so do to get involved in leftist activism? Where do they start? Or generally advice for young baby leftists or anarchists? If you're a leftist, I know there's a bunch of you. I see Comrade Jeb is in the chat. Hi, Comrade Jeb. I know Comrade Jeb is about 16. As a young leftist, I think the major thing that you need to do as a young person, especially like in that age range, 14 to 20, is that first of all, you need to make a community for yourself that is not on the internet. There's a big issue with people in that age range right now where so much of their daily interactions take place online that there's this loss of the ability to have social interactions with other people. I think there's like a recent study of Gen Zers. We've talked about this on streams before, so I won't go into too much detail. But that recent study of Generation Gen Zers put them at like extremely like a huge drop in the amount of face-to-face interaction they have with other people compared to people of previous generations. And I think that to keep you from like the difference between a leftist who cares about your fellow human beings and a heavy quote leftist like say Vaush or something is whether or not you have basic empathy for other people. And the way that you build empathy for other people is by knowing other people. And so I think that one of the number one things, like as a kid, you should definitely get involved in whatever activism you can do. I would suggest keeping out of the more dangerous stuff because, you know, you're a kid, you have your whole life ahead of you. There's plenty of time to get yourself in trouble when you're an adult. But to just make friends from different backgrounds. Make friends from people with different walks of life. When you're 14 to 20, you should be learning and absorbing as much of the world as you can. And I think the number one thing that young people don't do enough in our day and age is just spend time with other people who come from a different perspective than them. And then, you know, once you've connected yourself with people, you'll find plenty to do. When you have friends who are activists, you'll get invited to protests, you'll get invited to rallies, you'll get invited to stuff all the time. But I think that the number one thing you should do is get yourself face-to-face with other people, other leftists, or barring that, just other people who come from different perspectives and backgrounds than you. Because we're not going to build a new society on Discord servers. All right. Is the difference between cats and the bourgeoisie, they all benefit from the labor of others? Well, I think we established in a stream that all cats are libertarians because they really don't care about anything except for their own well-being, while dogs are communists. Luckily, though, cats are cute, so they kind of get away with it. What's your opinion on the whole Silva versus Bolsonaro in Brazil? The country's future seems more uncertain by the day. That is true. I don't exactly know. I haven't really gotten deep in the research on my stuff with Brazil yet, but yeah, I definitely am going to be getting to, like, with the whole stuff with Bolsonaro going down, that, like, the country's at a bit of a crossroads. Brazil seems to go through these cycles of dictatorship and republic that it seems like they're going back into dictatorship. And it would be really nice if they didn't do that this time. I've heard a lot of liberals say that you can't blame Trump on the decline of late capitalism because most of the people who voted for him are actually pretty well off. Response to that. So there's a couple things you can say to that. So, like, yeah, if you look at Trump's voter base is largely middle-class white men and white women. But typically, the biggest difference, the biggest indicator about whether someone is going to vote for Trump is race. It was white people. White people are the only demographic that voted for Trump. Unfortunately, because of the way the Electoral College works, white people's votes are worth more. So Trump got to be president. The reason why you can blame Trump on late capitalism, though, is because that's not the thing that that caused Trump to win. Trump didn't so much win the election as someone else lost. The reason why you can blame the Trump election on late capitalism is because of how many people were so checked out of the political process that they didn't vote at all. Or because of the way that election laws work, they were prevented from one reason or another, either because of their work schedule, because of their limits on transportation, because of their, because they have a criminal record, so they're banned from voting, or whatever reason they were not allowed to vote, or they didn't want to vote because they saw nobody reflecting their interests. If there was a U.S. politician who spoke to the issues of the suffering people of this world, they would have people getting politically excited for them. The fact that a huge percentage of Americans don't vote, period, is the sign that Trump's election had to do with late capitalism. To play advocatus diaboli, might the short-time benefit make the long-time benefit impossible? Might it be impossible to reach an equal economy if people aren't suffering under a really bad system? Yeah, I do think that making a digital shadow economy to counter the capitalist economy is, to me, less of a agent for modern day change right now. This is actually where I'm this is why we should be backing social democrats and things like that, because that is the best hope we have for making people's lives better in the short term. While in the long term, we should be investing in projects like a shadow economy and strengthening the power of labor as a way to foment, the future transformation of society. But those are long-term projects, and there are people hurting now. And so I am in no way, in many ways, I think that a group like the quote-unquote shadow economy could start less as a way for you to buy or for you to get your groceries, as it is a way for you to coordinate resources and information for protests and activist projects. Because, mince no means, I think that you're not going to get a ton of farmers and manufacturers and factories on that. As at the beginning, you're going to get a lot of service workers who can contribute their time and maybe some of their expertise, but not going to be much on the physical materials front. And so it's a good way to just organize for different types of activism. Okay. Don't you think you're being kind of unfair to people who are naturally introverted? No. This is in response to telling young people to go out and see other people. I think that it's tougher for introverted people. I push back against. I really actually don't like the word introvert. I don't think that the word actually means much as people think it is. In many ways, people will use introversion as a way to explain away issues to do with social anxiety, which is a serious issue, and I think is something that it's not it's something that can cause there's tons and tons and tons of studies that lack of social interaction, even a little bit of social interaction, can have detrimental effects on your day-to-day life, can have detrimental effects on your personal health. You die younger if you don't regularly interact with other people. We are, like it or not, social animals, and so trying to work out issues of social anxiety. Now, if you are a naturally introverted person and you don't I think that you should still meet other people. You might meet other people in different contexts. You might not be the person who goes to the big political rally, but you can still go to the organizing committee meeting for said rally. And also, like, making some people. If you have crippling social anxiety, though, yeah, that is that's a whole different thing. That's when you have, that's when you've got to really work out like you've got to be like working on like the cognitive behavioral therapy stuff. Like that is a obstacle to overcome, which is tough, and like my heart goes out to you. But like humans who don't interact with people who are different from them tend to become cold and unempathetic to their causes. And you'll be less kind to, like, you'll be less interested in combating Islamophobia if you don't know any Muslims. You don't know anybody who knows any Muslims. You'll be less likely to fight for trans rights if you don't know anyone who's trans. What you really need to do is go out there and meet these people. And trust me, if you're like introverted and has some shyness, and if you have like, if you have an aversion to social interactions, you will not be alone in leftist circles. There are a lot of people like that. It's just that it's still important to make the effort. So, I'm not saying don't do online stuff. Online stuff is great. Just, you should do a little bit of offline stuff. It's good for you. It's good for you in a lot of ways you don't know. I know so many trans people online and in real life. One of my roommates was trans. I guess she still is trans. We're just not roommates anymore. And yeah. So it's been like, it's good. It's good. It's good. So Tristan changed his name? No, C.R. Smith. Kelly and I both kept our own names. Neither of us changed our names at all. Is it true that polytheism in the Hellenistic world was already on the decline and being replaced by monotheism? Plato's the one being an example by the time Christianity came around. No idea, C.R. Smith. I don't know that much about ancient Greece, so I can't really answer that question for you. I'm not sure how to think about the idea that religions all tend towards monotheism. That feels a little teleological, but could be a thing. I don't know. It's not much my thing. Not much my area of expertise. What do you think about the old adage, the left multiplies by division? How do we prevent splits? Oh boy, if I had a solution to that, I would do it. I don't know. I'm trying to think of the times that the left really ever had a strong united thing, and it was stuff like the United Front in the 1930s. But like, I don't particularly want to share common cause with people who deny the humanity of people based on their gender identity or their sexual orientation just because they happen to be socialists. I don't particularly want to share the podium with self-described leftists who are actively like cruel and jerks to their fellow person, who have maybe YouTube channels where they spend 4 hours talking about how not affected they are, about how tough they are, because they dislike weak leftists or something. I think that's all. I don't know. I don't want to share space with them. But then again, we're not exactly large in number, so You could have hyphenated like my mom did with Tristan Barnes Johnson or Johnson Barnes. Yeah, like that was a thing. But like by the time we got married, like by the time we had gotten married, Kelly had already been published in academic journals, and I already had stepped back. And at the time, I was like we were in a situation where changing our names would have come with with a great deal of annoyance, and honestly, there's no real strong reason to do so, so we just didn't. Yeah, as a website tourist, yeah, even ANCOM split into smaller groups pretty quick in your experience. Yes, I've always noticed that no matter where you go, there's at least two, two anarchist organizations that hate each other because of something that happened in the past. That was true in London. I don't exactly know the answer to how to fix that, though. Because the left is full of people who have, conviction, which, it's easy to make common cause when you don't really care about your cause. You just want to get your person in power because, you're a fascist. But that's not a thing in the left. And so it's not a thing I wanted to do. Or it's not a thing I have an answer for. Do you get annoyed by some leftists who often look at the politics of entertainment? I just want to escape the world and read superhero comic books. I'm not reading comics for politics. I think that there's value in that. I think that, there's nothing wrong. I think that there's definitely like people consume problematic media all the time. There's really not much media that isn't problematic. And readings of media are a good intellectual exercise because what they do is they show the... because, unfortunately, this is a thing that we have to accept, is that media and culture are the ways that we imbibe and absorb political ideas, including the things that we think we're just absorbing for entertainment purposes. And so there is a value in looking at what is the political assumptions here in this piece of media. What do we walk away with as an assumption of understanding from it? And so there is value in that. It does in my mind, it means that it doesn't mean that you can that you don't have to you're somehow verboten from consuming problematic media just because it's got problematic elements. As the Dark Mother says, you can fully enjoy media even if it has problematic aspects to it, and even if the politics of the work are gross. This is a thing you can do. But I think that it's still valuable to look at it. I mean, there's that whole thing about the unexamined life, right? Is the unexamined life is one not worth living or something like that. And so I would think that it's all worthwhile doing. The Dark Mother, do you mean Oprah? No, it's a term for Anita Sarkeesian. Yeah, so I understand escapism can sometimes just be good and it's healthy to get away from the issues of the world, but doesn't mean you can you need to just because somebody's got problems. I'm repeating myself. Yeah, it's often necessary to enjoy media while also being critical of it. I think that's perfectly fine. Comic books can be fun. It's fun to watch someone punch the bad guy. It's also interesting to figure out what that says about the way that we perceive heroics and culture. In my mind, a lot of that stuff is about analyzing to see what these cultural products say about the society we live in now and the worldview of its creators. And in many ways, it lets us be more sophisticated and more wise to that kind of stuff. And it lets us think about, imagine how we could undermine those things. Oh my, I'm the Dragonborn? Does that mean I have to learn how to shout and do the dragon shouts? Or is this something else? All right, let's see. Okay. Is there any filmmaker who you think is overrated? Quentin Tarantino is one that comes to mind. Zack Snyder doesn't count because he's not a filmmaker. I still think that in some ways, what's his name? Steven Spielberg is a sappy boomer bait director who's made some good movies, but very often he makes sappy feel-good movies for boomers who don't have any real problems. And he is overrated in many ways for his bold stances. Which hurts me to say because, like, Lincoln, for example, is a really good movie, and so is, like, Jurassic Park. But his stuff is he's not like this, like, genius. His genius is not in, like, is not thematic. It has no depth. He's just technically a very good filmmaker, but he's just not like this genius that people make him out to be. What do you think of leftists who enjoy provocation or conflict, like people who get enjoyment from demos or confrontation with cops and fascists? Shouldn't the left be above it? I guess, like, I mean, you need all sorts of people to make a successful leftist movement. I think in many ways those people are doing the work of defending the most vulnerable people in our society, and if they weren't there, then we'd be in a dark situation. I think that if you're that kind of person, you're doing the Lord's work. I wouldn't do it, but I don't see it as an issue. Fascists and cops need to know that what they're doing is wrong, and that they need to face resistance at every single action they do. But and if there's someone who wants to put themselves in danger, then shit. Boris's nickname is Bojo. Oh, geez. What do I think of Boris Johnson? I think Boris Johnson is a bad prime minister who's going to... He's basically the worst... Like, the UK is in a situation where they need to somehow undo Brexit lest the entire country fall apart. And Boris Johnson is literally the worst thing that could happen to the United Kingdom right now, because he's like a pro, like, diehard for Brexit, hardcore, like, no deal Brexiteer guy who is going to really, really doom the United Kingdom to the worst fate that their vote in 2016 will lead to. Unless you're Scottish or Northern Irish, you'll soon be in a different country, but yeah. Yeah, it really sucks that Boris Johnson was not elected, that there was no way to not have him be prime minister. Um, we'll see what happens. Um, do we tend to sanitize many myths, especially Hellenistic ones, and romanticize them, such as Zeus being a serial rapist? Um, I don't know, do we romanticize them? I think we used to. I don't know if we do anymore. Like, I mean, I think a lot of the times when we talk about that kind of stuff, we talk about it as like, you know, ancient Greece being real weird. Um, and yeah, I definitely think that ancient Greece was definitely this extremely misogynistic, extremely like, with a really nasty rape culture that we could definitely talk about. But mythology is weird. It's a time to reactivate the Welsh March. I don't know. The Welsh don't seem to be in any desire to leave. Welsh seem pretty integrated with the English for some reason. Why in God's name hasn't the Queen stepped in? Tell her to just not give royal consent to any Brexit bill. I don't know. Actually don't know. I think the Queen probably is intentionally not making a stand on Brexit, because that would be seen as them intervening in politics, which is something that Liz does not like doing. And kind of in the way that the monarchy works now is supposed to be outside of the political structure. Even though she has to like meet with and approve every single prime minister, but it's not exactly a completely straightforward system now, is it? Is rape by animals zoophilia if it's a Greek deity? I'm not drunk enough to answer that question. Okay. So, how are we doing? It's 1:35. Okay. Kind of ran dry on the questions. Does anyone have any last questions before we call it an afternoon? I want to get some work done before I go see before I go down to go see the Thought Cafe people. But if anyone wants to ask any last questions, you can definitely do so now, and I'll take a look at them. Give you guys a second for the stream lag. Thanks for putting up with all my agitating. No problem. You missed a load of mine. I asked one about ancient farmers. I'm sorry. I missed a lot of things because I'm here flying solo. I can't do much about that. Sorry. How does someone in Toronto find access to a job without a car to access the gig economy? All of my jobs I found through Indeed, but I think that depends really on your educational background. The only thing I can think is you should find people who are in the industry that you want to work in and start talking to them about what their job is like and the group things they look for, and start trying to make personal connections to make inroads into said fields. That's kind of the way that the job market works now. What dead country are you most interested in doing? I mean, I did the one that I'm most interested in doing. The CSA was definitely the one that I wanted to hit. I'm kind of interested in like weird ones that didn't last long, like the Republic of West Florida, which I know only lasted like 10 days or something. But I don't think they probably didn't get enough like set up and established to really make for a video. I'd love to do... Did you see the list I sent you on Discord? Yes, I did see the list. I mean, I'll have to see what... I really have to see... I don't... my first instinct is to do Yugoslavia for the next one, but I'm real nervous about doing that one, because Yugoslavia is a one where it's a real complex story and not a ton of historians have written about it in English, and people from the Balkans are really, really touchy about their history and will like fucking like dox you if you like mispronounce the name of one of their rulers. So I'm super nervous about getting into that. Also, European history just makes my brain want to come out of its ears, but we'll see where it goes. Will you do more Dead Country videos? I'm interested in seeing more if there are more interesting dead countries. There are definitely some more interesting dead countries. I think what I might do is what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to see what the data says. Basically, it's all about what how viewership works out. I'm sure I'll come back to it someday, but it really depends upon how well the video performs, especially in bringing new people to the channel. At the moment, it's doing very, very well with subscribers, which is great. That's really good. So we'll see what happens over maybe the next few weeks. I have a whole season of videos already in production, so at the very least, it's not going to be until I finish those. And then we'll see what happens. What happened after that? Do you think that New Zealand and or Australia could survive World War III? Maybe. Really depends on the context of what World War III was about. If it's a war between New Zealand and Australia, maybe not. When are you going to run for Parliament? I considered it, but because it doesn't seem like having that carefully manicured persona is really all that useful anymore. Though I think I like the stuff that I'm doing more. I feel like I would be a shit politician. Would you consider the Iroquois Confederacy as a dead country? I would not, because the Iroquois Confederacy still exists to this day. The Haudenosaunee people still have a government. It still functions to this day. Rhodesia is one people have asked me to do a lot. Rhodesia, the USSR, and Yugoslavia, I think, are like the top ones that I think I got requested to do. I'm doing a video. There'll be a video on South Africa at some point in the near-term future, so we'll see what happens. Because Rhodesia's story is another English minority rule white supremacist state, so we'll see where that goes. Okay, I think that South Africa is still a country. Yes, I would not be doing it as part of Dead Countries. I'd be doing it as a, part of like the Brief History series. Could the Haudenosaunee have become a modern nation state? Probably. They already are. I mean, they are a tribal confederacy. They functioned as a state in the powers of 18th century America. So I don't see why they couldn't have just kept doing that. All right. If greed is part of human nature, wouldn't racism also be considered part of human nature? I would argue that neither of those are part of human nature. A video about apartheid. That is definitely something that I've been looking at doing. Question, was Rhodesia really racist? Probably. When someone like Dylan Roof puts their flag on your jacket, I think that's a pretty good sign that you're pretty damn racist. All right. Will you talk about Rojava not as a dead country? I have already done a video about Rojava, and American Johnson's done way better work than I would do on Rojava, so I would go and watch his stuff. In the years of rice and salt, they all take over North America and become a world superpower. Okay, that sounds fun to me. I'm not exactly. I think the years of rice and salt are. I have to see that. I haven't read that book. Wasn't Rojava Kosovo? No, Rojava is it's a libertarian socialist, predominantly Kurdish movement, like a sort of semi-state that's currently in Syria, in the Syrian civil war. All right, I think we've had a good run. So I'll be streaming again tomorrow and next Monday. So that will be good stuff. Thank you guys so much for coming out to the stream. Hopefully next week we can pick up and do some real fun stuff. We're gonna do some. I'm enjoying the stream. Please let me know if you liked how everything looked and sounded, because I'm trying to get this set up better because I think it's more pretty fun. So, otherwise, have an amazing afternoon.